Hello everyone, welcome back to Flames Plays Magic Mondays. And today I'm going to go over a modern deck tech. The deck we're covering today is Eldrazi and Taxes. And if you know me in real life, you know that I love Eldrazi. And the look of this deck is really cool. It's a black-white style lockdown, prevent your opponent from playing creatures and spells, whereas you get to really mess with them. And I'll go over the Taxes portion of the deck first. So first we have 4 Thalia, the Guardian of Thraben, which for 2 mana has a 2/1 body with first strike, but its main ability is the fact that non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast, which is pretty good since we have very few non-creature spells. Next we have Leonin Arbiter. It's 2 CMC for a 2/2, and his ability is that players cannot search libraries. Now any player can pay 2 mana for that player to ignore the effect until end of turn, but just a reminder in this case, make sure you pay that mana for his ability before you crack a fetch land. Don't pay it in response because it actually doesn't work that way. And I have seen judge calls due to that. And then next we have 3 Dark Confidants. It's 1 in a black for a 2/1 body, but his ability lets you draw an extra card at the cost of possible life lost. There's very few cards in here that are very expensive, so I think the most expensive one is probably 4 CMC. So you might lose 4 life, but more often than not, you'll actually draw an extra land, which is always awesome because you lose 0 life since it has no cost. For our removal, we have 2 Path to Exiles and 2 Fatel Pushes. Now, Path to Exile is a standard exile target creature, but the downside being the creature's controller gets to search for a basic land card. Now, that is a downside, but it's also possibly an upside, because if you have a creature that you don't care about or anything like that, but you need extra lands to be able to play additional cards in your hand, it's a good idea to possibly get that creature out of there just to get that extra land. And Fatel Push, it's standard card literally now. You can, for 1 black mana, you can destroy target creature if it has a converted mana cost 2 or less, or if you revolt, you get to destroy that creature if it had converted mana cost 4 or less if you've lost a permanent this turn. So a creature you control dies in combat or anything like that, you can Fatal Push away the creature. It has 4 CMC. It's not a big deal. We aren't actually playing any fetch lands, but Fatal Push is great in Modern due to the fact of fetch lands. But we're going to go on to Aether Vial. Now we are playing a full playset of Aether Vial. It's great because it gets around opponents' blood moons if we get locked out like that. But the main reason being is there's some tricks I want to show you later on where you can flash in creatures and just start comboing off and really disrupt their hands. But it's it's Aether Vial. It's 1 CMC, and at the beginning of your upkeep you can put a charge counter on Aether Vial, so it doesn't do anything the first turn really. But when you tap it, you can put a creature card with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Aether Vial from your hand into play. That means you can play creatures at instant speed, which is awesome because there's a certain card in here that's going to exile a card, and we'll cover that one next. But you might actually want to flash that in quickly once they draw a card before they have a response to play a sorcery or a land or anything like that. So here are our creature base. We have 4 Thought-Knot Seers, 4 Tidehollow Sculler, and 4 Flickerwisps. Thought-Knot Seer is a pretty well-known card and pretty much the Eldrazi in this deck. And when it enters battlefield for 3 and a colorless, yes, that is the colorless symbol, you get a 4/4 body, which when Thought-Knot Seer enters battlefield, target opponent reveal his or her hand, you choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. The downside being is that when Thought-Knot Seer leaves the battlefield, your opponent gets to draw a card. We've also got Tidehollow Sculler. It's a white and a black for a 2/2 body, but when Tidehollow Sculler comes into play, target opponent reveals his or her hand, and you choose a non-land card from it. Remove that card from the game. This one's different than Thought-Knot though, because when Tidehollow Sculler leaves play, return the removed card to the owner's hand. So they can get that card back if they kill a Tidehollow Sculler. As long as it's exiled though, they can't do anything with it. And Flickerwisp, 1 white and a white, for a 3/1 flying body that when it enters battlefield, you exile another permanent, and you return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So Tidehollow Sculler and Flickerwisp actually just delay the inevitable really with the card, but I'm going to show you a card that can actually convert that into baby dismembers. Wasteland Strangler. So for 2 and a black, you get a 3/2 body that technically has no color. It has the void, but when it enters the battlefield, you can put a card an opponent owns from exile into that player's graveyard. If you do, target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. So that Tidehollow Sculler, bamf, that's in the graveyard, and a creature that they have control gets -3/-3. Flickerwisp, that temporary exile, bamf, that's in the graveyard now, not playable at all. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. So Wasteland Strangler is kind of like our removal package with some hand disruption, really. We also have Eldrazi Displacer, which is great because it actually lets us recur that Wasteland Strangler. So for 2 and a white, you get a 3/3 body, which has, again, the void, another Eldrazi. And for 2 and a colorless, you can exile another target creature and return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Now you would think, okay, well, we want to, do our own creatures to recur their enter the battlefield. I'll show you. Here's the combo. So, you cast Tidehollow Sculler with Displacer on the field. The exile ability of Tidehollow Sculler, where the opponent shows you his hand, goes onto the stack. And the stack is a list of every card being played in order. And then once everything's done, the stack resolves top to bottom. And between the stack resolving, you actually get to respond as well. So Tidehollow Sculler's exile ability goes into the stack. Eldrazi Displacer then flickers Tidehollow Sculler. Blink forces it to leave the battlefield and to return. So this triggers the return a card to the opponent's hand ability and the additional exile ability. Stack resolves top to bottom, and the new exile ability goes first. You would actually exile 1 card from an opponent's hand. And this is the one that goes under Tidehollow Sculler. Then the return a card exiled by Tidehollow Sculler is resolved in the stack. And this one actually refers to the first Tidehollow Sculler instance. So it's technically a whole new object since it left the battlefield and came back. So you would actually not have to return anything because the original Tidehollow Sculler never got to exile anything. But the next ability that's going to resolve is the Tidehollow Sculler's original exile ability, which you get to exile a card until end of turn. It does not say under, it does not say attached or anything like that. So it doesn't care where Tidehollow Sculler is, it's just gone. It's in exile. And if you want to Wasteland Strangler that back into your opponent's graveyard, always possible. But it really just depends on how much mana you have and how much you're willing to sink. So it's pretty much a complete lock if you have enough mana or you're able to recur it enough. And speaking of mana, let's go on to the lands. So we've got 4 Caves of Koilos, which is great because it adds colorless mana to your mana pool and also adds black and white for it if you need to. The colorless mana is important. Many of the Eldrazi actually require it for their abilities. But the colored mana is actually necessary as well if you need to cast something else. We're running 4 Concealed Courtyards, that is the fast lands from Kaladesh, which when it enters battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer lands. And again, black-white. We've got 1 Godless Shrine, which is a standard shock land. If you pay when it enters battlefield, you can pay 2 life and it enters untapped, but if you don't, it enters tapped. We've got 2 Shambling Vents. It's one of the man lands from Battle for Zendikar. So it enters battlefield tapped, but it adds white or black to your pool. Or for 1 white and black, it becomes a 2/3 white and black elemental creature with lifelink until end of turn. So that's a good way to return some of that life that you might have lost from Bob, or from Dark Confidant, which we call Bob. We've also got 4 Ghost Quarters for locking out the opponent's Tron, if they have that, or disrupting an opponent's Eldrazi temples. It lets them search their libraries for a basic land card. That's about it. So if you're playing against Tron or against Eldrazi, definitely try to target those. Speaking of Eldrazi, though, we also have Eldrazi Temple. So, tap it, add 1 to your mana pool, no big deal. Tap it, add 2 to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast colorless Eldrazi spells or activate abilities of colorless Eldrazi. Remember when I said that Eldrazi Displacer was technically colorless because of Devoid? Yeah, that could be activated that way. So for 2 cards, 2 lands, you could actually activate Eldrazi Displacer's ability instead of having to tap multiple or 3. So that's a great card for any Eldrazi deck, and it's very necessary. You need to have a full playset in those. We also got, for the basic lands, we got 2 plains and 1 swamp. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the sideboard now. Sideboard's kind of, you gotta figure out your local meta and how it is played, but we've got an extra Path to Exile, an extra Fatal Push, Grafdigger's Cage, which shuts down any kind of flashback or collected company. Actually, this targets that because they can't enter the battlefield from graveyards or libraries. Rest in Peace just shuts down all dredge or any kind of recursion, which is always great. Surgical Extractions awesome against Tron lands or against anything that your opponent can recur or actually leaves a giant threat. Stoney Silence is of course in there for affinity because activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated, so they basically have a bunch of rocks. Layline of Sanctity is great against burn. I wouldn't actually suggest mulling to do 1 in your hand because there's so much disruption we have already, but if it's in your hand and you have a decent enough hand, go for it. Don't, sacrifice your mana just for Layline of Sanctity. You can eventually play it yourself. You have white mana available. And the last card is Orzhov Pontiff. It's a bit of an interesting card because it's barely ever seen play in Modern as far as I'm aware of. It's 1 white and a black for a 1/1 body with Haunt. So when the card is put into a graveyard from play, remove it from the game, haunting a target creature. When Orzhov Pontiff comes into play, or the creature it haunts is put into the graveyard, choose 1. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, or creatures you don't control get -1/-1 until end of turn. The reason that's in there is actually due to token decks. You can actually wipe out all their tokens in one go, or just the extra pump that you need to get through with the damage. Alright everyone, so that's all for Eldrazi and Taxes, and let me know what you think about the deck down below. I really like this deck. It looks interesting. I actually play Modern Eldrazi myself, but I play completely colorless, so I might actually build this with what I have already. But if there's any decks you guys want me to go over in the future, feel free to let me know down below, or send me a DM over on Twitter. Feel free to subscribe and be kept up to date by joining the bonfire. And I hope you guys all have a great day, and remember to burn bright, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.